What do armadillos, communists, and grenade launchers have in common? If you said RPG, it means, well, you use Google Gemini to answer the question. What the hell, Gemini? However, if you said Chuck Norris, it's because you've seen the movie that we're talking about today. Invasion USA is not just a classic Chuck Norris movie, it is one of the best Chuck Norris movies, and one of my all-time favorite action films. It has explosions, and Uzis, and denim, and car chases, and Uzis, and helicopters, and Christmas, and Uzis, and rugged beards. It's basically the quintessential Chuck Norris movie. In this film, Chuck plays a guy whose name really doesn't matter because I'm just going to call him Chuck anyways. He's some sort of former CIA operative, a one-man army of sorts, who retired from the company, as it's called, and lives in a shack in Florida. His nemesis is a Soviet psychopath named Rostov, played by Richard Lynch. Before we get started, don't forget to subscribe to the channel if you like these videos, or if you just want to hate watch them and get annoyed from notifications each time we post. And hit the like button to help fight communism. When the movie starts, we kick things off with a Cuban refugee boat that's escaped the country and is trying to make its way to Florida, only to find out that their engine is dead and there's not an AutoZone within miles. I guarantee you there is a Dollar General out there somewhere, though. With everybody stuck under the sun and no fresh water or food, it seems hopeless for them. Suddenly, though, a U.S. naval boat shows up and things are starting to look up. Then they all get shot and things start looking down again. The fake U.S. Coast Guard is led by Rostov, who anybody could have told you just by looking at this guy that he is some kind of bad guy. After they wipe out the refugees, we learn that the boat was carrying a shit ton of cocaine under the floorboards, possibly unknown to the passengers on the boat. But why? We'll get to that in a minute. We switch locations and land in the Everglades, following Chuck Norris around as he glides across the water doing Mach 12 on his airboat. Nothing much is going on, he's just sort of cruising his territory, surveying the wildlife, and while the scene works to establish its location, it's mostly there as filler so that way they can show something while the opening credits roll. And don't worry, Chuck might not be doing a whole lot now, but he will definitely be doing a whole hell of a lot later. Anyway, the Coast Guard boat turns up at a dock, packed with dead people on it, presumably the Coast Guard members who were on it before it was stolen by the bad guys. The police also show up to check it out, as well as a very loud and annoying photojournalist who is under the impression that just being with the press gives her the right to invade crime scenes. After a brief argument where she's pretty much just yelling at them while they calmly ask questions, she declares that they will let her go, but they have to check her film first. I mean, yeah, sure, probably, at least to make sure that you didn't screw the crime scene or anything. But you put yourself in that situation, lady, so why the hell are you having a psychotic fit over it? The scene continues and concludes with more yelling, with the police pretty much just standing there waiting for her to shut the fuck up. And spoiler alert, she doesn't.
I was covering a story.
By the way, in this review, at some point, I started calling her a reporter instead of a photojournalist, so yeah. When we come back to Chuck, we see he's just relaxing at his swamp property, wrestling a Florida gator for shits and giggles. At first, Chuck pretends to struggle with the alligator and give it a sense of confidence, make it look good in front of its buddies, and, seem like it at least has a chance. Eventually, Chuck gets bored, though, and since he's really just doing this to help out his friend John Eagle, he subdues the gator easily and then packages it up for a prospective buyer. We get another quick scene switch, which happens a lot at the beginning of this movie, and we find Rostov trying to do an exchange of the drugs for guns with some kind of low-life criminal who doesn't really matter because he isn't going to be in this for very long. Rostov quickly kills the shit out of this guy, blows his dick off, then throws his coke-sniffing girlfriend out a window, and you're just sitting there thinking, holy crap! Even the Will Ferrell meme doesn't adequately explain how quickly things escalate around this guy. Back on the swamp, John Eagle is sitting in his airboat, parked outside Chuck's big-ass 1,500 square foot, two-story shack, complete with a full-size, half-wraparound porch. What the hell? Look at this thing! Maybe it's just me, but this shack seems kinda gigantic. And I can't help but think that the outside is just a front, and inside there's probably like 30 rooms, including a sauna, a weight room, a home theater, a bowling alley, a car showroom, servants' quarters, his own private McDonald's. It's like Emilio Estevez's camper in Loaded Weapon 1. So anyway, John is trying to sell this gator they caught to some guy who's complaining about how tired the animal looks. I mean, of course it's tired. It wrestled Chuck Norris. It's going to take it like 5 years to recover just from that. That night, we see what looks like a tax accountant or a bank manager or some shit rowing a boat out to Chuck's wooden palace in the dark. After he sneaks inside, he finds Chuck's roommate, an armadillo named Dr. Henry James Johnson Jr. V. Distracted by the majestic animal and the beautiful falls surroundings that I just know is hiding a game room and an indoor swimming pool, the intruder doesn't realize that he's right where Chuck wants him. Out of nowhere, America's hero teleports into the scene and grabs the guy, forcing him to shit his pants profusely before begging Chuck to return to the CIA and help them deal with Rostov. Chuck gives him a polite fuck off and a told you so, reminding the government CIA bank manager agent that they should have let him take out the lunatic when he had the chance. There's a little bit of back and forth, but Chuck gets tired of the scene and just leaves his entire house, He just exits like the director called cut while the CIA guy is still standing there frustrated, like he had some great Oscar-winning line that he was supposed to do and Chuck said no. We get a glimpse of the past through a flashback showing the time Chuck was talking about. Rostov is set up outside a foreign home while the American ambassador is inside. Before he can launch a rocket through the living room and ruin everybody's evening, Chuck shows up, puts a gun to his head, and then gives the movie's signature line, "It's time to die." However, apparently it really wasn't time to die because Chuck obviously never shot him. Instead, he blesses Rostov with a kick to the face so hard that it jolts the psychopath awake in another dimension. This is apparently a recurring nightmare that he's been experiencing, and it's made him a bit wacky. It's screwing with his head and making him focus more on Chuck than on their mission, and when his cohort tries to tell him to ignore it, Rostov basically tells him that he doesn't care, they need to deal with Chuck because he's a threat to the mission. And man, was he right. Chuck goes outside bright and early to handle his morning wood, unaware that Rostov has somehow found his house and pulled together a suicidal group of guys to go after his arch-nemesis. They don't really explain how Rostov knows that Chuck is in Florida either, which seems like if he knew that and he was such a huge threat, he'd avoid that place altogether and start this thing up in like Washington State or something. But knowing he lives in Florida is one thing. Knowing where his house is, when he doesn't really have a street address or probably appear in any phone books, is even more baffling. Almost as baffling as knowing that one of the guys going after Chuck is Lightning from Big Trouble in Little China. Keep that in mind. To fight Chuck Norris, Rostov had to recruit an immortal, demi-demonic elemental sorcerer. And that whole immortal part is definitely going to be put to the test later. The group plans to do a drive-by on Chuck before he can come after them, but just as they try to attack, John Eagle shows up and interrupts their plan. The shootout happens and John predictably gets killed. They also blow up Chuck's $1 million shack just days before it was supposed to be featured on Lifestyles of the Rich and Famous. Assuming they won, they leave the scene, unaware that rather than killing Chuck, their actions actually dragged him into the fight that he previously had no intention of getting involved in. So, that was dumb. Chuck takes his friend's dead body and puts it inside what's left of his house, then burns it up like a Jedi funeral before abandoning his armadillo and heading off to dry land so he can purge the United States of communist assholes. If only Chuck was still here today. Meanwhile, one of Rostov's guys goes out and blows away a couple of young people making out on the beach, using a scoped handgun in the world's most useless suppressor. Moments later, a massive army of Cuban soldiers arrives on the beach. There are hundreds of these guys flooding in from multiple boats, armed and ready to completely abandon the cause and go off to Disney World, because we never see any of these guys again until the end of the movie. This is one of the funniest parts to me, because so many of these guys show up, and then throughout the majority of this film, we see like maybe 20 bad guys. The next morning, the police investigate the beach, unsure of what all these boats are for or who was on them. The first thought is that it's some kind of drug smuggling thing, but they rule that out and assume it's something else. The annoying-ass reporter also shows up, acts like a smug asshole because the police won't talk to her, and then she tries her hand at Chuck, who also doesn't have any time for her bullshit. Now, I do find it funny that the police actively hold the reporter back behind the police tape, but nobody at all asks why Chuck's allowed in. It's just police, witnesses, and Chuck. Later that night, we arrive in a nice neighborhood with families outside setting up Christmas trees, kids playing, and a couple making out in a car. The bad guys arrive and start launching rockets into random houses, killing everybody indiscriminately, blowing up families, children. Then they just drive off, leaving the neighborhood in ruins. The scene is actually pretty horrific, and it screws with your head when you realize this kind of thing isn't as far-fetched as it seems. And with a growing number of psychotic weirdos out there, it becomes even scarier. That said, these days, at least where I live, those assholes wouldn't make it out of the neighborhood alive. I live in one of those rural areas where we have more guns than silverware. And while they might get a couple of houses, they're getting their asses lit the fuck up before they get much further than that. In 1985, though, things were different. In movies, at least, you see that the most people had was maybe a revolver, a double-barrel shotgun. In this neighborhood, they probably had nothing, which is why they offered no retaliation at all. Worse, this is only the start of the mass murder. Lightning goes out dressed up like a cop with some other dude, blowing away a bunch of young Cubans out trying to have a good time. Oh, and the reporter? Yeah, she's also there too, because of course she is. Some people are left alive on purpose, including the reporter, so witnesses can tell about the police attacking them. This has exactly the effect you'd expect. When the real police show up, they're attacked by the witnesses because the witnesses believe that it's the attackers coming to attack them again. And this is what Rostov wants. He wants chaos, division, and total upheaval across the U.S. We then see Chuck driving through what I can only assume is Durham, North Carolina, where he's yelled at, threatened, and randomly attacked by shitbags in the street for no reason at all. He eventually ends up at a bar where, after meeting the local door greeter, he joins up with a former contact he helped save in some place that doesn't really matter because it's a pretty common backstory element. and it has no basis on anything in the film. The dude gives him some information, tells Chuck that Princess Rostov is in another castle, and Chuck moves on to get closer to his target. Soon after, we're introduced to the Cuban versions of Lenny and Squiggy, if Squiggy also happened to be a bodybuilder. They're pissed off when some bad guys' shitsickles run over the bucket of water they're using to wash their car. At first, they try to brush it off, but Lenny isn't having it, so they go inside the bar/whorehouse to confront the guy who almost ran them over. It's there that we find out Chuck has already gotten to him. After asking this guy to stick around for a polite conversation, Lenny comes in and tries to get involved, but Chuck sends him back out, adding one of my all-time favorite Chuck Norris lines.
If you come back in here, I'm gonna hit you with so many rights, you're gonna beg for a left.
Undeterred, Lenny goes to get Steroid Squiggy to help him out. That doesn't go so well either, and after irritating Chuck a little bit too much,
You're beginning to irritate me.
he kicks him out of the room, gives the bad guy a grenade and a message for Rostov, and then heads out. The bad guy manages to get away, though, by throwing the grenade out the window, blowing up Lenny and Squiggy's freshly washed and waxed car. Guy's having a bad day. It's also funny to remember that that guy's not actually a bad guy. Him and his friend were just outside washing their car. The bad guys rolled up, did some stupid shit to them. They went for retaliation, tried to get at the guy, Chuck Norris knocked him back, then kicked his friend, and just a few minutes later got their car blown up. These guys are the real victims of the communist invasion. Anyway, moving on. We learn that the attacks are mounting up, with over 20 the same night as the Cuban restaurant shooting. At a crowded shopping mall, fake patrons with bombs inside shopping bags stroll around looking for the best place to deliver their Christmas nightmares. Things don't go quite as planned, though, so a few gunmen start plugging away at everyone. Just as it seems that all hope is lost, America's hero in denim shows up with a big-ass pickup truck, dual Uzis in hand, delivering a heaping helping of 9mm justice. Chuck jumps into the fight, spraying bullets at the communist horde to take back the capitalist cathedral and ensure that everyone can enjoy high prices on cheap cardigan sweaters. Realizing there's no defense against Chuck Norris, they hotwire a Nissan pickup truck and try to escape, but Chuck isn't having it. He leaps onto the side of the truck as the villains drive through the mall, smashing him into everything they possibly can, and only losing him when they crash through the front door. Chuck is of course not hurt at all, but the pavement where he landed needed 17 stitches. At the same time, the asshole reporter shows up, and I'm really starting to think that she's in on this because she's always there when crazy shit pops off. To prove she has no brain cells, she grabs her camera and starts snapping pictures of the violent terrorists that are shooting at her and Chuck. Mall security, however, realizes that this job is not worth $3.35 an hour and bounces the hell out. We're now on a chase with Chuck, going after the bad guys who have sped off down the road, dragging a woman along the outside of the truck. Things get pretty intense because we don't really know how this might go. It's a gritty 80s action movie. She could make it, or she might get dropped and turned into a hamburger helper underneath Chuck's wheels as he goes after her captors. Fortunately, she makes it, and comes along for the ride as Chuck defeats the enemies by driving aggressively. Weirdly enough, though, everybody in the car is totally fine after the car chase and explosion they witnessed, including the woman who was almost killed after being dragged outside a truck, racing down the highway through traffic, jumping off of hills, and being sideswiped by Chuck. Women in 1985 were totally different than nowadays, that's for sure. This whole event only freaks out Rostov even more, showing that Chuck's kick to the face apparently knocked a few marbles loose because he can't do anything but obsess over him, completely jeopardizing the mission to collapse the country through chaos and panic. That said, his efforts are actually working. The National Guard is on the streets of Miami, working to protect the public, but it seems that they've been infiltrated by Rostov's bad guys. When Chuck comes face to face with Lightning, he quickly shows that he's faster. The scene doesn't take long, but it shows why 4-on-1 isn't good enough odds when it comes to fighting Chuck Norris. Around the rest of Miami, the roads are being closed off and helicopters warn people to stay home and off the streets. However, there is one family out wandering around because, of course, there would be. They headed off to a church with several other people inside, and Rostov is there planning to blow it up. But when he hears that Chuck is killing off his guys just a few blocks away, Rostov heads out to hunt him down. With their leader gone, a few of his minions are left to take care of the church bombing. They wire up the suitcase holding the C4 and then head back down the road with the other end of the cable to safely send the electrical charge and detonate from a distance. However, things don't go as planned, and we get a scene that makes really no sense at all, but basically, Chuck has taken the bomb with him up to the roof of a building overlooking the bad guys. When they try to blow it up, nothing happens. It's not because he disconnected the wiring from the bomb, but somehow he has the other end of the cable, which should be inside their detonator. So, in other words, one end of the wiring is still in the bomb, the other end is somehow simultaneously in the detonator on the ground and in Chuck's hands on top of the building. Okay. He tosses the bomb to the ground where the bad guys are at, then with the other end of the wire, touches the positive and negative ends together and creates an arc of electricity to run to the bomb. But where did the electricity come from? It's not in the C4, and the relay box in the suitcase doesn't work like that to set it off. And why is the relay box blinking and making noise? Look, this scene bugged me so much that I had to look up how C4 works just to make sure that I wasn't the crazy one. And after all of that, you know what? I don't even care anymore. It doesn't matter. As far as I'm concerned, Chuck obtained the powers of electricity after fighting lightning in the previous scene, and it caused the wires to become electrified. All that matters is that Chuck defeated the bad guys. The next day, the reporter whose name I don't know nor care about shows up at a grocery store protest where people are angry that their purchases are being limited. This is due to the mayhem causing delivery delays. Basically, the store doesn't have enough stuff in stock and people are pissed that they can't buy more things than exist. And with the reporter being there, it means that the bad guys are there too. Dressed up like soldiers, they pull their guns out to mow down the protesters, which really doesn't make any sense at all. You want people to be angry and turn against each other, right? So why are you knocking off the very people you worked so hard to create? I guess it doesn't matter though, because Chuck fucking Norris shows up and saves the day again, running a should-be totally beat-to-hell 1978 GMC K1500 High Sierra pickup truck through the bad guys' blockade, then getting out and giving them plenty of lead injections. One of Rostov's main guys tries to take the annoying reporter hostage, which honestly is not much better than taking one of his own men hostage. She yells out for Chuck, but this time, instead of calling him Cowboy like she's been doing throughout the movie, she calls him Hunter, which is his name in the film. However, at no point in this entire movie prior to this did she ever learn his name, but somehow now she knows it. Then, when he saves her, she gets all pissed off and starts bitching about how he could have killed her. She then tries to attack him but hurts herself while doing so, and then blames him for it, throws a trash can lid at him and misses, then reverts back to calling him Cowboy like it's some sort of pejorative. Chuck really should have just let them have her. Meanwhile, a group of kids are being taken by school bus off to the country to be away from the violence. This, of course, means that the bad guys have to come after them. As they all sing Row, Row, Row Your Boat in unison, something that did not happen. Look, I grew up in the 80s. We didn't sit on a school bus singing songs together, but whatever. As they're going down the road, the bad guys drive up fast, slap a bomb on the side of the bus, and then drive off. Fortunately, Chuck is on the case. He and his trusty steed blast off down the road, grab the bomb, and return it to sender. It's totally ridiculous, funny as hell, and again, nobody cares because this shit is awesome. But as it turns out, not everything is going so well. Chuck visits a carnival that was apparently bombed at some point, killing several people, including some who were kids. He complains that his efforts are not saving everyone, and we realize that even Chuck Norris can't be everywhere all at once. They had to include that to remind you that this is actually a fictional story. Still, Chuck has a plan on how to put an end to everything. He gives the CIA tax accountant guy a demand, and we're left to understand that whatever his plan is kind of suicidal. At the same time, we learn from the news that the governors of all 50 states and various military officials are meeting in the Florida war zone, which seems like a really stupid idea, you would think. Like, maybe meet somewhere where the terrorists aren't. But they're meeting to discuss some sort of plan to deal with the attacks that are supposedly happening all over the nation, despite literally all of it happening in Florida. And that brings me to another point. If you've ever seen the box cover for this movie, it shows Chuck Norris standing in the center with his Uzis, and behind him on one side is Washington, D.C., and on the other side, what looks like New York City. Neither of these places are in this movie. The whole thing takes place in Miami. I don't remember the name of it, but there was another movie that I rented once because of the woman on the cover, and as it turned out, she wasn't even in the movie. It was basically a bait and switch. At least in the case of Invasion U.S.A., they tell you that this stuff is happening through a news broadcast, even if the entire story seems to indicate it's a localized problem for Miami. But Dave, what about the hundreds of guys who got off the boats? Maybe they're going all over the nation stirring shit up, and that's why you never see them until the end. Yeah, I'll get to why that's not the case in a moment. After enough day saving, Chuck is sitting around in a cheap hotel watching an old science fiction film when the only detectives in Miami and a small SWAT team break through the windows and door to arrest him. I know this seems counterproductive, especially considering the police's only function so far has been to show up after the fact and count the bodies, while Chuck is actively knocking off bad guys left and right. The lead detective then gives him some sort of speech declaring that he doesn't know who he is or who he's fighting for, which would seem pretty obvious considering he's constantly saving the American people and only wiping out the communist invaders. And if this guy hasn't been able to figure that out, it shows you what kind of skill level these detectives are at, which might explain why they haven't been able to capture anybody or stop any of this. Instead, they bring in the one guy who has been doing something about it. Moments later, a news broadcast plays letting everybody know that he's been captured after killing 10 suspected terrorists. And considering Rostov is watching the broadcast, you immediately know that this whole thing is Chuck's plan. Anyway, the police bring Chuck in, and a TV reporter is allowed to broadcast his words live, in which he directly antagonizes Rostov and threatens him. This might seem totally crazy to let him do this, but give it a few minutes and you'll get the whole picture. Rostov and all the bad guys from the boat show up, and this is why I said they weren't all over the country. Somehow, they showed up at a moment's notice, like they were within a few hours driving distance. Either that, or they all somehow caught flights that happened to be coming to Miami at the same exact time. And what a time it was, because we see Chuck's master plan in action. Not only did Rostov's small army show up, but so did the National Guard, surrounding them in one place to finally obliterate them all. It takes a while, but the trick works. And with Rostov and a few guys inside the empty building, also evacuated per Chuck's plan, they're all trapped inside with him.
I'm not locked in here with you. You're locked in here with me.
Chuck walks around cleaning up the rest of Rostov's guys, and then takes out Rostov in a way that I can only imagine had the theater laughing and cheering at the same time. If ever there was a movie that shows the greatness of Chuck Norris, it's Invasion U.S.A. It's violent, filled with ridiculous shootouts and things that are totally nonsensical, and perfectly captures the essence of Chuck Norris. It's not packed with roundhouse kicks, though, since this isn't a karate movie. However, it is a gun-toting, blow-up-everybody, shoot-everything-that-moves movie. And the thing is, even though I poke fun at it, the movie's actually great, even compared to some big-budget modern action movies. And yeah, we've got more advanced special effects these days, but a lot of movies today don't even feel like movies. The actors aren't convincing, and the action scenes aren't even interesting. In Invasion U.S.A., though, as ridiculous as some parts of it are, it has convincing actors and convincing action scenes. If I ever see Richard Lynch out in public, I'm calling the cops, not just because he's been dead for 14 years and would obviously be a zombie, but because I could totally buy this guy as a terrorist asshole. And Chuck Norris is a badass, tough guy going around blasting the enemy, blowing up guys with grenade launchers instead of just, shooting them. He plays that character with intensity, even as off the wall as such a character may be. And he did it time after time, convincing whole generations of people well before the memes that Chuck Norris was not a man to fuck with. And when it comes to the action scenes, what you're seeing is actually happening, to some degree at least. This movie's not packed with CGI. When you see a woman hanging on the outside of a pickup truck driving down the road through traffic, even controlled traffic, that's actually happening. She's not standing on the pickup truck's step in a warehouse in front of a green screen. And that's why both scenes in Invasion USA with somebody attached to the outside of that Nissan pickup truck were exciting. Because that's a real person being dragged in a dangerous situation. And in case you're unaware of this, the 1980s was pretty damn notorious for hurting and killing stuntmen. Look, there's a reason Invasion USA is my favorite Chuck Norris movie, with Sidekicks coming in a close second. Sidekicks is a comedy, and it works well for what it is, which is why it's become a cult classic. But Invasion USA is a heavy fistful of action clobbering the hell out of the audience one scene after another, with Chuck showing up in random locations to save the day. And you know what? They don't even need to explain how he does that, because you don't care. You might make fun of it, but you keep watching anyway. The movie's engagement factor is high and is fun as hell to watch, despite the impossible scenarios or nonsensical moments. The movie came out in 1985 and cost $12 million to make, but pulled in $41 million worldwide. That might not be breaking any records, but considering its status among fans of Chuck Norris, of which there are many, it likely tacked on a vault of cash in just VHS sales, including the expensive versions video stores had to purchase to rent. My copy is actually an ex-rental from the video store that I used to work at that saw a ton of heavy checkouts. And now it sits in my office among some of my other favorite movies, ready to be watched again at a moment's notice. Thanks for taking the time to check this video out and listen to me go on about Invasion USA. Subscribe to the channel and get alerted when we kick out more movie reviews, recaps, and shorts. And be sure to share this video with your friends and your communist enemies. And of course, drop a comment below and let us know if you've seen Invasion USA. If so, did you like it? Did you hate it? If you liked it, what was your favorite part? Or even better, what's your favorite Chuck Norris movie? Should you have just let the communists have the reporter? I would. That woman was annoying as hell.
I was covering a story.
And finally, does any action star today rise to the same level as Chuck Norris? That's all for now. Don't forget to like this video if you liked it, and if you didn't like it anyway, otherwise you're a communist. Have a fantabulous day, and don't let the bad guys win. Goodbye.